Well, welcome everybody. This is July 27th. We are at a special board meeting for the Windsor Unified School District. And we are meeting tonight with a short agenda, but we wanted to make sure that we could make some decisions prior to our board meeting next week. So at this time, I would ask Jen to please do a roll call for us.
President Heights.
Here.
Vice President Ahmad.
Here. Trustee
Adams.
Here.
Trustee Carnation.
Here.
Trustee Valenzuela.
Here.
Okay, thank you, Jen. Item 2.2 on our agenda is a flag salute that we traditionally do, and I'd ask Trustee Valenzuela to please lead us with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Okay, thank you. Put your right hand over your heart, ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And it's just a bit of a sidebar. Maybe we can work on this with Jen or with Brad. Another meeting I was part of that did a flag salute, they shared the screen and put a flag on. So maybe we could do that for next time. That would be a good indication to we'd all be representing the flag that way.
I will work on that for the next meeting.
Thank you, Jen. Superintendent Decker, do we have anything to report out of closed session for tonight?
No, we do not.
Okay, thank you. And trustees, do we have any adjustments to the agenda? Anybody have anything they want to change or move around? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. Item 3.2 is public comment. And we did not receive any public comments that were not part of tonight's agenda. So we'll skip past that and we'll move on to item 4.1, which is the consideration of approval of a calendar change for the upcoming school year. And I will defer to Mr. Decker to lead us through that item.
President Heights,
So
you should have gotten something from Anne Solomon.
Yeah, that's in relation to our agenda tonight. So Superintendent Decker said he would discuss that in his motion.
As long as you got it. Okay.
We did, yes.
Thank you. Thank you, President Heights. So we have had a number of discussions around, what the beginning of school is going to look like. And one of the things that we'd like to do as a district is make sure that we give our teachers, our parents, our students some information that they can depend on. And we decided that we want to do two things tonight. We want to establish the start date for school, and we also want to establish how long we're going to be doing distance learning at the beginning of the year. As everybody knows, because we're on the watch list, we are required to do distance learning to start the school year. As such, we've shifted our planning from really a hybrid schedule planning to really planning around distance learning with our numerous subcommittees. Now, we met with WDEA recently, and we talked about a number of different things. But one of the main topics of discussion that we found some common ground on was the fact that we need some professional development days for our teachers in order to do distance learning effectively. And we also want to give, again, like I said, some peace of mind for our teachers and families on the date when we would, for how long we do distance learning. So we have made some modifications to the calendar that we're bringing before the board. And they are as such that I'm going to ask Dr. Canalake to go through the date changes as well as kind of some of the rationale for why we made the date changes. I've given you the general overview, but he's going to go through the specific days so that you really understand why everything is that it is. Dr. Canalake, are you prepared to talk about the calendar?
There we go. Yes, I am. I'll accept the mute button. Everything else is perfect. Yes, so we, with quite a bit of discussion and a lot of engagement of our partners here, we determined that it was really the best thing to move the start day, as Jeremy had mentioned, from originally the 13th to the 17th, which buys us 2 additional days to prepare for the school year. And in addition to that, we also reinstated the, or proposing to reinstate the professional development days that were removed because of budget concerns. And we have the learning loss mitigation funds to fund that. So that's really a celebration. So we added, in total, 4 additional professional development days for our certificated professional staff. And those will be on the August 7th, 10th, and 11th. And then we're going to have an additional professional development day reinstated on October 16th. That's already a day off for students, but it will now be a day where our teachers will be working and you know, you can do a lot of professional development before the school year, but it's really important to have some time afterwards to really consolidate that information. So that's why the October 16th date was added. And then to make this all possible, of course, I mentioned the learning loss mitigation funding, but also we borrowed or used 2 days from the emergency dates in April. So as we had said earlier, we were going to work backwards if we needed to use any of those days. So we took April 2nd and April 1st, Friday and Thursday, made those school days. And so now we've used 2 of our 5 emergency weather week days. So I think that about sums up the changes. Jeremy, did I miss anything?
No, that was perfect. And so now I want to explain some of the rationale for why these recommendations are being brought before the board as they are. So the learning loss mitigation funds are one-time funds that need to be expended by December. Some parents and staff have asked, why can't we delay school for, you know, a month or 2 months and start late? We're not actually allowed to, because the state is requiring that students still attend 180 days of school. And so with this mechanism that we're proposing to the board, we are not extending the school year in any way, because we're borrowing from those emergency days. So the students will still graduate the same day, and none of that changes. They will just go to school 2 more days over that, the emergency day week, as we said. And that's basically, those 2 days are why we can push back the start date by 2 days. So this will not add anything to our general fund, our bottom line. These are one-time funds that we're spending, and we are not changing the end date for school, only the start date. The other thing that was not really addressed is that we're proposing that we do 6 weeks on distance learning, and we set it. So regardless of whether or not we come off the watch list, we're proposing that we plan for 6 weeks of distance learning, and we will reassess at the end of those 6 weeks based on what is going on in the county. And I will say WDEA was in agreement with kind of these proposals, these recommendations that we're bringing to you guys tonight. Are there any questions?
Yeah, I'd like to go, and then I'll ask George to be next if that's possible. So you talked about working with WDEA and adding the 2 extra staff development days. Have you also worked with CSEA and let our paraprofessionals be a part of that as well?
Yes, I know Chris has worked with CSEA on this and talked with Brad directly. So Chris, I'm going to ask you to speak to your conversations with CSEA.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I had some preliminary conversations with Brad Freeland, and of course on our on the many planning teams that are engaged right now. We're kind of on the cusp of developing and well, not really finalizing. We're getting there though. All of this professional development, and we really feel it's going to be essential to bring classified staff aboard for some of those, if not all of those days prior to school starting as well. So our paraprofessionals and some of the other staff, like student advisors that'll be closely engaged with students, we'd like to have them on board, because we know that that we're going to need their services, because and we did use their services in the spring during distance learning, but this is this new iteration is a much more rigorous and more consequential learning activities for our students. So we really want all hands on deck.
And before we kick it to George, I think one of the things that the impetus for bringing this before you now was because the calendar gets changed. So I think there's still conversation to be had on exactly what the professional development looks like on those days. And it may change, but we wanted to make sure we got the calendar before you so that our families could really do their planning.
Okay, real quickly, I think it's a great calendar, and I'm glad we're going to get some PD for our teachers. That's a great thing. Getting back to Jeremy, the issue of going hybrid distance learning till mid-September. What happens then? Do you convene another board meeting and say on such and such date we're going to hybrid, or how much time do you envision giving parents the notice that we're going from one model to the next? And my last
That's a
point,
great question. Great question.
and my easy question is on the calendar. If we could just move it where it says North Bay Met and Windsor Oaks graduation, June 3rd, why don't we just move it up to the top? Because chronologically it looks weird, June 4th, June 4th, June 3rd, June 5th. Maybe that's just something that I don't like, I don't know. But it makes more sense to move it up. I know why it's down because it's closer to the Windsor High graduation, but numerically it should probably go above Windsor Middle. That was it.
Yeah, and George, you asked this question that we've kind of discussed, but we don't have a great answer for. So we've talked about, what happens when it comes September 25th, and then are we just going to come back the next day? And we don't think that's the best way to do things. We think that we need to have a transition time, but we're saying that on the 25th, we will know what we're going to do next. So maybe we can transition in a week. I think that's part of kind of the subcommittee work and how we go in and out of our different, models. But I would say that, and Pete, I don't want to speak for you, but we did have this discussion. I think that the feeling from our teachers is that they'd like some transition time and not just cold, we're not ready next.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. The situation just keeps changing, right? Baseball made it 4 days before people started testing positive, and they're outdoors and, all the money and everything they can. So we will know a whole lot more over the next 6 weeks.
Yes, Bill, you'd like to go next, and then Stephanie?
Yeah, so you mentioned 6 weeks, and then September 25th, which is the 6th Friday, was talked about. I think for clarity for the families, today when we approve this calendar, are we saying we will not change from distance learning prior to Monday, September 28th?
That is our recommendation to the
if
board.
If we could be clear about that, so no sooner than that date, and I absolutely agree. I think, we'll know, as I understand the watch list and the time and the buffers, there's 2 and 3 weeks worth of rolling data, right? So we'll know going forward. I would certainly encourage us to invest in the transition if all the planning for the hybrid model bears fruit and we're ready to go and looks good on the 15th of September, we figure out how we do that, right? If that means we need to gap one or more of those days for an intensive professional development to the hybrid model, we hope that we can maybe burn a couple of the emergency days. But I think giving very clear, unambiguous, not before this date will we change. That's one. The other question I had is, are we going to see updated memorandums of understanding for both WDEA and CSEA that reflect these adjustments for reopening school for COVID?
You will. I will say that we're going slower than many others, Bill, and we're doing it by design.
Good.
What we recognized as a team, and I will say WDEA, the district, is a team here, is that a lot of places jump into, getting their MOU signed, and then they just have to change them 4 or 5 times because this changes so quickly. So
Understood.
we're really trying to be strategic in making sure that we have everything thought through and looking at different MOUs that are out there and making sure we bring you the best version of what we can.
So not today, but when we get closer, and it may be after we actually start, I know this is CARES money, so it's the one-time money that comes out of that learning loss and other things. But I'd like us to keep a catalog so that sometime we can hear as a board report to the community how much additional money has been involved in reopening the schools under these circumstances. I know that's a moving target, and we have it, and let's spend it and do it right. But just at some point, I'd like to try and capture that so the community is aware of that. Thanks very much for your work on this, everybody.
All right. I think this will be a pretty quick point. I wanted to circle back to the public comment that we got just on one point, which was the end of the school year. I think the person who sent in the comment is fine with the school year being pushed out. So I was hoping that either Jeremy or Chris could speak to why we don't want to do that, why the approach is better to keep it as is.
I mean, I guess I can speak just to my own personal feelings on it. I think it's best to try to have some normalcy in our calendar. I think that if we can, because of those emergency days are there, we may as well try to utilize them. There sure is an emergency. And we can, you know, because we have them, I feel like it's an opportunity for us to use them and not push out the end of the school year. June's a rough time for instruction, having been a teacher, and it's pretty tough. As soon as June 1st hits, those kids are thinking it's summertime and they're ready to go. So I think that if we pushed out the school year 3 weeks to a month and we're ending in July, I think that that would be tough for instruction, frankly. But I'm happy to have others chime in if Lisa or Chris or Pete or anybody would like to chime in on this, please do.
From the high school, we like to give people plenty of notice when graduation is. So, you know, not extending the end of the school year makes a lot of sense. We've always had to have it on a Saturday, you know, so people from far away could attend and everything. And, you know, with all the stuff we've been dealing with between fires and power shutoffs and all that, you know, you don't want to have the end of the school year constantly changing.
Another discussion about that goes mostly at the high school as well is that grades are given on semesters. That's the official marking that goes to the universities and for graduation. And if we waited and started late in September or later in August or early September, we would not be able to finish the semester prior to winter break. Like when I went to high school years ago, many years ago, we started after Labor Day. But then we came back after the winter break and did about 3 weeks or 2 weeks before we had finals. So there was a couple weeks of learning loss that were in the middle there. And I think since then we made some good strides in education to try to consolidate those dates so that we don't have families on vacation or people traveling and students stressed out about coming back and having forgotten what they learned. So we try to finish the semester prior to the winter break, and starting late in August or early September would not allow for that to happen.
It's a great point, Eric.
Jeremy, real quickly, we might already do this. I want to make sure that the calendar is in Spanish as well, because this year is going to be a little different with the yellow highlight in March in terms of the emergency weather days. We've got to make sure our parents understand that. So I think we do the calendar in English and Spanish, but I just don't remember.
We do, and we do, and we have that queued up and ready once this is approved.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any further discussion about item 4.1, the proposed calendar? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands up from the board or the cabinet that are here. At this time, I would accept a motion to approve this calendar.
So move.
First motion by Trustee Adams.
I'll second it.
Second by Trustee Carnation. All those in favor of approving item 4.1, the proposed calendar for the 2020-21 school year, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you. That item passes 5-0. And we will be able to push that out to community. And since it's already been translated, all of our stakeholders will get that, receiving it soon. Thank you all. Let's see. Oh, I just lost my agenda. There we are. Item 4.2 on our agenda is consideration of approval of the revision of the salary schedule for the teacher, middle school counselors, and high school counselors. Director Canalake, would you please talk to us about item 4.2?
Okay, sure. This is the, as a result of adding those 4 additional days rather than time carding for the teachers for that additional time, we thought it was better to integrate it into their salary. And so we made that adjustment. And just to refresh, earlier in the spring, we took 2 days off of their salary schedule because of the because we pulled those PD days back because of the shortage of funding. Now we're adding those 2 days plus an additional 2 days, and so it's so that's what you have before you is basically the teachers have 4 additional days, middle school counselors and high school counselors the same thing.
And to speak to this, just on a little bit further point, we could have just pinked these days and had our teachers, you know, receive pay, but to put it on the salary schedule means that it can go towards retirement. And so it's a much nicer thing for our staff to ultimately have this be part of the salary schedule.
Any comments from the trustees or the cabinet that's involved in the meeting here? Trustee Adams?
Yeah, I had a question. I understand this is coming out of the CARES funding and the one-time money for learning loss. About how much is this overall? Number one, is there some additional cost over and above the certificated costs that go to our classified staff? And I haven't seen you publicly talk about it. I know you talked with us in closed session about a couple of things. Are we at a point, Superintendent Decker, that we can talk about what our sort of allocation of this $3 million in CARES money might be? Or if we're not ready to do that, could at least talk about how much these additional days of salary, well earned and well deserved and a good plan, but how much is that eating into the $3 million?
I'll ask Lois to speak to that, but I will say what we have planned so far to spend some of these dollars on are technology as well as professional development days. And so we still have not fully fleshed out the full $3 million, but those are the first 2 things that we are spending our dollars on. Lois, could you speak to the exact numbers, please?
Of course. It's approximately $280,000 for 4 days for the teachers. And for classified, we will be paying them hourly, and we still have classified, I mean, we might use the CARES money, but more efficiently, we have classified professional development money we received from the state several years ago that we still have a good, healthy balance on.
Thank you for that.
And I know the answer, but I'm going to put it out there just for the public. Maybe Pete could speak to it or Jeremy, but as a teacher, I would want to ask the question, since this is now on the salary schedule, will it be ongoing and will it stay there, or will those monies be coming back off in the future?
They will be coming off in the future, unfortunately, as these are one-time funds. But obviously we negotiate and we discuss all of these things at negotiations, but this specific decision is just for this year.
And teachers want training anyway, so it's a win-win. You know, I think with Zoom meetings they'll be able to freely choose whichever training is best for their needs. And I know Lisa has talked about and Brad have talked about not having tons and tons of different new programs or applications for teachers to learn, but trying to zero in on a few and making sure that that people can use them well. So I think it will work out well.
I think there's agreement by the board. I don't know if there's any more discussion, but if you're ready, Eric, I would make a motion to approve this item.
I was just looking at the chat. There were some questions earlier that I hadn't seen, but we've already passed that item. So, so item 4.2, the consideration of the revised salary schedule. I would accept a motion to approve.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Trustee Valenzuela. I will make the second motion. And all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so we're passing 5-0 to revise the salary schedule, and the staff could be made aware of that, and they'll be working on staff development earlier than we expected. So that's a good thing. All right. At this time, that's the end of our agenda. We do have a couple questions that were on the chat section here that were coming in from outside. I'd like to address them a little bit. We do have some time. I don't want to just blow these people off and make them feel unheard. But I'll read the first one. It says, this is coming from somebody named Shauna. It says, I am having a hard time accepting independent study upon ending of the term for distance learning, as I consider the health and safety of my child. I believe that it is by no means adequate in educating my child, as I need to keep my child home as a precaution for other reasons. Given my rights to receive an adequate education for my child under the current laws, what does the district plan to do to make education equitable if we opt not to have him attend physically? So maybe Lisa could address this, or Jeremy. If a parent wants their child to stay home for health reasons, and we do go back to either a hybrid or a full-time model, what's the plan for those children in that situation?
So the good
I'm going to ask
news,
Lisa what that said.
okay. The good news is that we are going to be rostering all students as if they were coming back in person. So what that means is they will be rostered to their 2021 school teacher or teachers if they're secondary students, and we will be able to fluidly have them participate in distance, hybrid, or in person, because they will always be rostered the way that they were rostered if they were coming in person. So what that means for families is that if and when it comes time for us to talk about transitioning to hybrid, for families who, for various reasons, fit one of those state criteria and are not in a position to feel like they can send their kids safely back to in-person learning, even in a hybrid model, they can opt not to do so and stay instead on distance learning for as long as they feel it's warranted for their children.
And so just for clarity, we're not really calling that independent study. They're just continuing their regular program, just not coming in person.
Right. So for independent study, which is a different program, and I encourage folks to pay close attention to the table that we sent out in Friday's correspondence. It breaks it down fairly clearly, with a couple of exceptions based on some feedback we received today, and we'll be sending clarification about that. But with regard specifically to independent study, that is a program that is a voluntary placement. It's based on space and availability. There's not a guarantee of it. And once a student is placed, they sign on for a 6-month or semester-long contract. And it is issued by, the teaching staff is issued by us. So it would be a Windsor Unified District independent study teacher. That would be the point of contact. So if people feel like that's what they want, that's one thing to be able to talk about. However, it loses the flexibility for students to be able to fluidly move back into in-person learning at any point in the school year. So it's almost like moving schools, because in an independent study placement, you're with a district issued independent study teacher. And if you decide at any point to have your child transition to in-person learning, you would need to contact the school principal. The principal would have to fit you into an existing class that's been meeting already via distance, and you would have to meet a new teacher or teachers, new peers, etc. Whereas in distance, you can remain at home in your learning environment, but with your 2021 rostered teacher.
Thank you, Lisa. That's good clarity. Hopefully parents understand that, and we'll keep pushing information out often to give them the updates as we go. There was another question that came in. What happens if we need to use those emergency days that we're borrowing from in case we do have fires or PG&E shutoffs or floods or whatever else may come up? Maybe Dr. Canlake could talk about that.
Sure, I think it might actually make sense for Lois to talk about the J13 waiver process. But we use those if we have those days that we need. Let's say we have floods or PSPS happens. We use those days. When we're out of those emergency days, then there's a process for applying for a waiver from the state, and hopefully we would be approved based on everything that's occurring. I don't know if you'd need more than that, but if you want to go into more specifics, I'm sure Lois would probably be the best person to discuss the waiver.
And that's the process we've used the last couple of years, Lois?
That's correct. And there's not been any known cases of a state not approving waivers at this point.
And because we added 5 days, I think that gives us extra sort of protection. You know, some districts were going 2 or 3 extra, and because we added a lot, we're making a good faith effort to cover.
Correct.
And another benefit, as much as we don't want to call it a benefit of hybrid or distance learning, is that once we have become more expertise at this and the students are more comfortable with it and the teachers have done a better job with it, if we do have to miss some days in January or February, we can automatically go back to that distance model and still meet the children and still work with them, pending electricity failures and things like that. We hope that we can still make those connections and have that social emotional aspect as well. Okay, no further comments. I would take a motion to adjourn the meeting at this time.
I'll move to adjourn.
Thank you, Trustee Ahmad. Do I have a second motion for adjournment? Trustee Carnation. All those in favor of adjournment, please say aye.
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 And we will be back on the air next week on Tuesday at 6 o'clock. And so we will look forward to seeing our audience on the screen, and hopefully many of you can follow on Facebook Live. Thank you all.
Thank
Bye,
you.
guys.
Take care, everybody. Be well.
At this time, Brad, you can sign us off and we will close out.